Challenges often require creative solutions, and the city of Davenport, Iowa is demonstrating that in its response to disaster in 2019. Joining me to talk about creative placemaking is Corrin Spiegel, Davenport City Administrator. Hi.
Hi.
So let's talk about what happened in Davenport in 2019 and what was the initial response?
So there are records in your career you never want to set, and natural disasters are those. So we had catastrophic Mississippi River flooding. We don't have a flood wall, and we've learned to live with our river. But that year in particular, we set 4 different floods through NOAA. The longest duration flood ever and the highest ever. And unfortunately, because we don't have a flood wall, we use temporary systems, and they failed.
Wow, so we're going to talk about a phrase that I haven't heard of before, creative placemaking. What is that, and how can artists amplify the voice of its residents?
So placemaking is what you think of it, right? When you visit communities, there are just places that you're drawn to. You're not going to drive into a suburban neighborhood and be like, oh, I love it, right? 'Cause you can do that anywhere. So creative placemaking is how a community looks at a specific destination it has and says, this is the place that we're gonna have be special.
Okay.
For us, it happens to be 9 miles of Mississippi riverfront, and it's developed over decades with different characters. And right now we're focused on the area in downtown Davenport, which was devastated by the flood.
And so what have you been able to do since the flood?
So the good news is, if you looked at it today, you wouldn't know it flooded. You would just see it as a riverfront. And before the flood, interestingly, we had casino gaming on boats in the river. And so that's moved landside.
Okay.
And over time, we've restored it. So right now it's in a state of restoration.
Okay.
With our ARPA funds, the City Council devoted $6 million to what we're now calling an adventure zone, so a destination play area that is meant to be inclusive and multi-generational. And fortunately, our governor, through their ARPA funds, has launched a $100 million investment in exactly creative placemaking for the communities. So in about 2 weeks, we'll be submitting a $20 million grant that transforms the Mississippi riverfront into a multi-generational, multi-experience destination.
You've got to be really excited about doing that, right?
It's super cool, and other cities have done it. So we're working with Sasaki Design, who did the Cincinnati riverfront, which you'll be familiar with. So they're inspiring us to be both authentic to who we are, but to use the things other communities have learned. Living with rivers is a very thoughtful decision. So we're going to design an area that can flood, and it's meant to flood. But then it's meant to go back to being this amazing place for our community to experience.
I love that you've been able to take what was a major disaster and turn it into an incredible opportunity and almost like a destination for people when they come visit that area.
And that's one of the interesting things. So 22 years ago, the state of Iowa did something very similar. And so we have a sky bridge, which is also the city's logo now. And so people love to come into the sky bridge and see the river when it's flooding. It's one of the only places in our section of the Mississippi, and she's a big, ruthless river where you can go see her, whether she's low or flooded. You get to watch the barges, the river boats, everything. So you get this up-close personal experience with this riverfront that can be both scary and truly inspiring.
It definitely sounds really beautiful. How can city administrators get started on creative placemaking today? And is it for everyone?
I think every community has opportunities, right? Scale matters, authenticity matters. So you can't come to Ohio and say, I'm going to make a Mississippi riverfront, right? It just doesn't work. So you have to work with the fabric of your community, and I think that's what's really important about placemaking is what's authentic in your community. And so whether it's historic buildings or new buildings, repurposing of schools is becoming this great amenity for placemaking. Repurposing malls. The malls we all grew up shopping in are not going to be part of our kids' future.
That's something we can definitely do in Ohio.
But that's okay, right? Just because I was reminiscent of Christmas shopping in the mall doesn't mean that's a future our children are going to have. And so what do? Do you just tear it down? Do you think of how to do something differently? There's no shortage of opportunities. And I think back to your earlier question, involving the artist community, they're the most creative, and whether it's architects or truly artists, they see the world differently, and so they can bring you ideas that you didn't even think of. And so making sure you're engaging the right parts of your community is actually the most important part.
Engaging the right parts of your community. I love that. Corrin Spiegel, thank you so much for talking with us today, giving us this information about creative placemaking. What a great idea.
Thank you.